Well, I am delighted to be here. My name is Kathy Bubb. I am a certified Christian educator. I am officially a member still at Mifflin, Presbyterian in Gahanna. That's where my husband served as a pastor for almost 10 years. And I was on and off the staff as an educator. He retired in June, but my membership is still there because why not? For the last, so actually his retirement is a year and 2 weeks, so not that we're counting or anything. And so for most of the first part of the year of our retirement, I say our, I'm not quite old enough to retire, let's be clear about that. But we did a lot of traveling, and since the second half of the year, we've both done some pulpit supply, and David, my husband, is currently finishing up 2 months at Marysville First, where he was doing a gap pastorate. They have an interim there, and she had knee surgery, and so he stepped in as a gap pastor for 2 months right now. And so we're currently debating the whole gap pastorate versus pulpit supply. The pulpit supply, you walk in and you say, hi, where do I stand? You talk and you go home. The gap pastorate's been a little bit more than that, so I think he's going to go back to pulpit supply a little bit after this. I am conscious of two things. One, that you probably all know each other, and secondly, sometimes even in a group, not everybody always knows. And so if you would just do me a favor and real quickly, if you'd say your name and one thing you're looking forward to in the summer. You can't give every detail of a cruise, Joel, but one thing you're looking forward to for the summer. My name is Kathy, as I said, and we're going to Synod School in Iowa in July.
University of Iowa.
Nice. Well, they have a super Synod school that's really very affordable. So FYI, yay. So
Sheila Seifer. Just to be outside and to see my friends, neighbors.
Susan Immel, and I'm looking forward to getting my leg in shape so I can go to Chautauqua.
Joel Ursula, and I'm looking forward to a concert in July. And I'm taking Asher to Columbus Symphony, who had the 90s rapper nods.
I'm Ann Teskey, and we met you and your husband through Habitat for Humanity because Mifflin has been a strong supporter, and my husband's one of the hammerer. I'm one of those bring sandwiches. So we're looking forward to traveling more.
Doug Teskey, and more sunny days and more golf.
Lynn Pratt, I'm looking forward. We have a family reunion, her side of the family's.
Oh, you still lie.
Oh. Okay, well.
I'm kidding.
But we have a family reunion at the end of
And you're saying how excited you are to see her land. Yeah, that was a save.
I'm Joanne Pratt, and I'm sure, are both looking forward to being empty nesters again.
Nice.
I'm Mona Connolly, and I am also, we had a deck built last summer or last fall, and I'm looking forward to sitting on that deck.
Just so last week, and
And I'm Dave. I second that and look forward to going to Germany this summer too. So this.
I'm Jean, I'm looking forward to going to Scotland on Thursday.
All right.
Thank you, Scotland.
All of them.
I'm looking forward to a family reunion in October.
Karen and Mark looking forward to listening to birds.
movies. It's
I'm Rusty, and I'm going to Chicago next week to grandchildren. My wife and I, and this is how we're going to Africa.
so no.
well, let's continue on our time in prayer. Loving God, we thank you for this chance to be together with old friends and new. We thank you for the blessings of this coming summer. We ask that you open our hearts and minds that we might focus on what you are calling us to do and be today. In Christ, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Want to start with a reading from Matthew 25. Well, let me back up one step before I do that. I'm here to talk about Matthew 25. Not necessarily a deep dive into this scripture lesson, but as you know, the denomination has a renewed focus and emphasis on what is often referred to as the sheep and the goats parable from Matthew. And one of the things that I think is really important is, as we share our brief time together, figure out what you already know. And I know Joel has been doing this series on Bible congregations. So real quickly, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being all you know about the denomination focus on Matthew 25 is what I just said. 10 is you really ought to be up here teaching this class instead of me. So think for yourself, along that scale, how much do you know about the denomination's focus on Matthew 25? So how many of you are a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6, a 7, an 8, a 9, and who's taking my place? It was worth a try. It was worth a try. So Matthew 25, which is probably up there with John 3:16 and Psalm 23 in terms of stories in the Bible. Of course, you've heard Matthew 25. But I want you to just listen for perhaps a word you haven't heard before. Okay? Again, I'd love to deep dive on this, but I've got some other things to share. But I do think it's important that we're grounded in the scripture. So listen for something, even a word or something about it that perhaps you haven't heard before. And you might not come into anything. Starting from Matthew 25, verse 31 and following. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep at his right hand, and the goats at the left. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, "Come, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you, a stranger, and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these, who are members of my family, you did it to me." Then he will say to those on his left hand, "You that are accursed, depart from me into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, you did not welcome me. Naked, you did not give me clothing. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me." And they will also answer, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and did not take care of you?" Then he will answer them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did it not to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me." And those will go away into eternal punishment, the righteous into eternal life. The word of the Lord. So, what'd you hear? Anything new or a jolt or something that resonated that you hadn't paid attention to before?
I read it yesterday. I did not like the part about the people who didn't do what they were supposed to were going to end up in hell.
Yeah, the
I
eternal
didn't like
punishment.
that kind of stuff.
Eternal punishment, we can get together a whole other time to talk about the whole issues of eternal punishment.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Anything else? Yeah,
I guess I haven't heard the phrase "devil and his angels."
okay,
Who are the devil's angels?
okay.
I could think of a couple.
We'll have a marker board, and we'll write their names on the board. Anything else?
Here's the other thing, it's not stated specifically, but the sin of omission, of not going and doing something when you had the opportunity.
Yes, because you're exactly right. It didn't say, "I was hungry and you beat me up, you ignored me, you had," it's just, you didn't. It was the ignoring parts. Well, I think for me, one of the pieces that connects me to the Matthew 25 initiative particularly is the very first, actually the second. All the nations will gather. This isn't it's not as much about you and me. It's about what we do as community. And I think that's what the Matthew 25, one of the things about that initiative that really rings through to me is, as a nation, as a country, what are we doing for the poor, for the hungry, for the homeless, for the stranger? And that, I think, is where we fall short, because I think, I can say I work at the food pantry, I build habitat houses, I am doing these things, I am helping. But as a nation, what are we doing? And so that's what gets into what is, for a lot of people, the uncomfortable part of Matthew 25, because it talks about structural and systemic issues. Yeah, Joel.
Just to know, one thing that did stick out was that it is a mistranslation there, as you know. The first part's right, the nations come before, but then when you say, and he separates the people, that's where it's wrong. It's actually, he separates the nations as sheep and goats. We constantly hear this and go, oh, it's about me and my individual actions. That's not what he's talking about. He's separating communities and peoples. That's what's being judged, not individual. As Westerners, we've been trained to think everything is about my personal, individual salvation or damnation. That is not what Matthew 25 is about, which is why the PCUSA has turned it into a corporate thing.
That's why, that's the part I.
It makes a huge difference. People is actually not in the Greek. Then he separates the people. The translators added that word, and they're wrong. It's not there.
That's good.
And as an aside, for other parts of Scripture, there's a whole lot of Scripture that we take singularly that is plural. A whole lot of things that I think, well, it's just me and mine, I'm done, and it's not. It's plural. Both words of challenge and judgment, as well as words of hope and aspiration, are to a people, not me. Yeah, so thanks for specific on that. So we had it pulled up a minute ago. We'll see if it'll pull back up again. I just want to show you Diane Moffat.
You do your thing, and I'll
Yeah.
get us back. It dies when we get quiet.
And understandably so.
I get that praying a bit on me. Been with that.
So once again, listen for something new, which sounds like will be most of the video. So it's not terribly long, but I believe, is quite inspiring.
Greetings, friends. I am Diane Moffat, President and Executive Director of the Presbyterian Mission Agency. By now, I hope you have heard about Matthew 25, a sound biblical and theological basis for the Presbyterian Mission Agency's mission work plan, which focuses on building congregational vitality, dismantling structural racism, and eradicating systemic poverty. Matthew 25 originated in 2016 when the 222nd General Assembly passed an overture for the Presbyterian Church USA to be a Matthew 25 church. The focus on Matthew 25 was underscored again in the General Assemblies of 2018 and 2020. In Matthew 25, particularly verses 31 to 46, the story of the sheep and goats, Jesus makes clear that what we do matters to God. How we treat the least of these is important. Jesus counts himself among the least of these. He also uses the phrase to speak of his disciples. As disciples, we are called to continue the work Jesus began, speaking truth to power and building a world where people are no longer marginalized. When we engage in the work of proclaiming good news to the poor, sight to the blind, and liberty to the oppressed, we may end up hungry, thirsty, naked, sick, in prison, and in need of welcome. As we work to change systems that cause human suffering, we too are part of the least of these. Matthew 25 reminds us that our work is not in vain. That is why the Presbyterian Mission Agency's focus to build congregational vitality is important. We are called to share the good news of Christ in word and deed. Congregational vitality is the embodiment of that good news in Christian principles and practices that nurtures and leads believers in congregations to actively engage the world, following Jesus in making disciples and doing the work necessary to build God's kingdom. A question to test a congregation's vitality is this: who would miss your church or congregation group, besides the people who are now a part of it, if you were to stop your ministry? Congregational vitality intersects with the PMA's focus to dismantle structural racism. You may recall when Jesus was asked, what is the greatest commandment? He said to love God with all our heart, soul, and mind, and our neighbor as ourselves. Racism is a sin against God and neighbor. Structural racism is the normalization and legitimization of an array of dynamics: historical, cultural, institutional, and interpersonal, that routinely advantages people who are white while producing cumulative and chronic adverse outcomes for Black, Indigenous, people of color. Dismantling structural racism requires committed followers of Jesus Christ to fearlessly apply our faith to advocate and break down the systems, practices, and thinking that underlie discrimination, bias, and prejudice. The third focus of the Presbyterian Mission Agency's work is to eradicate systemic poverty. And of course, this focus also intersects with congregational vitality and racism. Systemic poverty is a lack of material and social capital to ensure basic well-being. It's a human construct, just as racism is, designed to exploit people through laws, policies, practices, and an array of dynamics that lead to the perpetuation of an impoverished status. Systemic poverty requires that we do more than offer a compassionate response to people who are poor. We must address the root causes of poverty by acting on our beliefs and working to change laws, policies, plans, and structures in our society that perpetuate economic exploitation of people who are poor. We are asking your church, mid-council, or group to join us in being a Matthew 25 church. Matthew 25 helps us to connect and unite the Presbyterian Church, creating a spark that energizes and joins us in our common mission together. Matthew 25 gives us a language and a lens for doing mission together. It shows us our understanding that as Presbyterians, we are saved to serve. The hopeful outcome of Matthew 25 is to increase the spiritual energy, increase the impact of our church in the world, increase new disciples and participation in ministry and worship. We are already seeing these outcomes. The momentum is up. The invitation is being accepted by numerous churches, mid-councils, and groups across our denomination to be Matthew 25. So I hope you are as excited about being a Matthew 25 church as I am. I hope you are ready to work with others and to help heal God's people as we look at systems. Systems need to be fixed, not just people. I thank those who have already made the commitment and will pray with and for those still discerning the invitation to join us in being a Matthew 25 church. And my friends, if you need resources to help you in your discernment process, I invite you to visit the website. There are Bible studies, worship resources, film guides, videos, a frequently asked questions brochure, and a Matthew 25 hymn and reading list for each focus of the Matthew 25 vision. These resources are intended to invite you into this gospel work by identifying the entry point that you might consider for your faith community. Once you have made the decision, the next step is easy. Go to the website and sign up your congregation and council or group to be a Matthew 25 entity. Now, if you want to learn more about the Matthew 25 vision, please contact the Mission Engagement Advisor for your area by going to this website. I am also available and would be delighted, along with other staff members, to meet in person or virtually with your church, Presbyterian synod, or group regarding Matthew 25. I want to thank you in advance for helping to connect and unite all Presbyterians in our common witness to bear witness to Jesus Christ. Together, we are being a Matthew 25 church, and I'm grateful for that. Grateful for you. Thanks for listening.
Talking to an innovational person.
Yeah, exactly. So congratulations, by the way, on being a Matthew 25 church. I understand you have a focus, you have chosen as your first focus the building congregational vitality, and again, Bill's been doing your sermon series. One of the things that the Matthew 25 focus, the underlying assumption is that when churches engage in dismantling structural racism and eradicating systemic poverty, they will become more vital. I mean, that's why those three are so much together. And vital congregations will naturally want to reach out more and more to the community. So let me say one other thing about what she said, and then I want to know what you said about what she said. One of the things I forgot to mention was the scripture reading. And this came out, read this recently in a book by Dr. Liz Theo Harris, who is a Presbyterian minister with the Poor People's Campaign, which I'll do a 30-second commercial for at the end. But in talking about the Matthew 25 scripture that we read, we often want to talk about, see how much Jesus cared for the poor, because he talks about feeding hungry and hungry. Jesus is the least of these. Jesus is the least of these. And so even as she was talking and said, when our churches and as individuals, when our churches and mid-councils, when we walk alongside those who are hungry and thirsty, we become the least of these as well. And that, I just think that's an important piece. Again, it isn't just Jesus saying, they're there, take care of them. Jesus is saying, that's me, that's me, that's me. And I think for some, that can maybe change our framework a little bit. So, enough for me. From you, what are something you heard that was exciting, daunting, overwhelming, puzzling, confusing? Yes?
You know, Kathy, when I see things on TV, I read in the paper, I realize the country, the United States as a whole, is going the wrong way. If you look at all this stuff, you know, even the city of Columbus, all these abatements for the rich to build low-cost housing, which is not low cost at all.
That's right.
And the city doesn't do anything, they're actually supporting that, so they're wiping out that poor, it's only gonna get worse, you know? And then you hear all this stuff, oh, we're gonna teach our kids in school that the Civil War was all about, there's really no war there, you know? That's all racism, and it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse, and it's a little discouraging. I can see Covenant can make a good impression and make improvement in where we are right now. I can see that we can be more politically active, and that's, you know, we used to send letters to legislative, to Congress, and we haven't done it for a little while. So there's little things that we can do, but I think there's so much corruption in the government that it's the bottom of the ninth inning, and we got 2 strikes.
And you know, that's a big challenge. Not the problems in the world, which are of course are huge, but the problem is that it's so easy to say, what good is this going to do? What good is my work, Covenant's work, even our Presbyterian's work going to do? And part of me shares that. Part of me shares that despair, that where are things going? But I think one of the reasons that Matthew 25 movement gives us hope is that there are, I wrote my number down here, 1,200 congregations and 96 mid-councils, and 68 other groups. And that's just within Presbyterian circles. So there are a lot of people who are working hard to make things change. And, you know, it's your starfish on the beach. Why does this matter? Look at all the starfish on the beach. It matters to this one. And when I do it and you do it and the Methodists do it and the Episcopal, everybody does it, then we have to believe it can make a difference, right? You know, God is working God's purpose out as year proceeds to year. We have to believe that it's going to work out, and we've got a part in that. Or else, yes, it can just be the despair, forget it, I'm just going to go sit on my desert island by myself, and no, good luck to the rest of you. So I think despair is a big issue. Yeah.
I think one of the things, because I was in upper education at the end of my career for about 12 years, is the, I'm not sure which Supreme Court issue, but the U.S. Department of Education said that public universities would not, or colleges would not receive any aid if they had departments of diversity. And you're like, well, systemic racism, smack in the face, is, on the other hand, if they don't say this is a special population, but you're all part of it, is that good or bad? I haven't figured out. At first, my reaction was very negative, and now I'm not sure. I'm trying to process through it.
Well, and I should have said as an aside, our topic is so big and there's so many pieces of it, we ought to be jotting down forum ideas for fall, for other things to delve into. What, you know, because that's the whole point. What if here intrigued you, caught your attention, you want to know more about, you see a place for covenant to speak to some of these issues, that's really what you want to find out more about. And so that would be the sort of topic. Find you some speakers who can address that and wrestle with some of those issues.
Because those departments are actually being eliminated.
Right.
People being, let go.
Yeah, Joel.
I share both in watching the video, the despair, and then also like the steel, the commitment that we need to make. So this week I think was the 4th anniversary of George Floyd's murder.
Yeah, yes.
And kind of the blur on the news Chiron while I was getting my haircut was basically everything that everyone's tried to do to address police brutality and systemic police policy of racism has since then been undone.
Yeah.
Which is and from a system standpoint, completely unsurprising. What systems do is go, just be quiet, just wait it out. We can wait these people out, and they're pretty much always right. But what we have going for us, now the question is, midnight, 2 strikes, whatever, bottom night dinner. But I don't know how many of us thought in terms of systems until 4 years ago. I really think that the murder of George Floyd.
It's certainly not been made public. There hasn't been a lot of publicity in the media even in that regard.
There was an awakening in that moment.
That's right.
That was real. People were not marching together against racist police practices in the 1960s across racial lines. It didn't happen. It was King and Malcolm X and people of color marching on their behalf, and white people saying, I don't know about this. So there was a genuine change in consciousness and solidarity that took place. But what about 4 years being passionate surprises that coming awake to it didn't change it? Of course not. So what I was, in terms of my hope, is that we need to start thinking in terms of decades and centuries instead of, months and years. It's going to take that much time to undo. The Presbyterian Church has been in this country for 300 some years? And we're just now, since 2016, saying, okay, time to start thinking in terms of systems. In 300 years from now, what are the choices we're going to make today that will actually help undo some of these things? Because that's the amount of time it's going to take.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good observation. And the other thing is looking around the room, most of us went most of our lives, no matter how much we were involved in civil rights, in poverty issues, even we weren't thinking, many of us, about systems as much, right? And so if we're just now, a lot of people our age have to rethink some of this, right? I mean, I don't know how much you've done here at Covenant or been in conversations about, let's pick issues of racism, and you talked about the issue of white supremacy. And people, I'm white, I'm not, I grew up poor and I didn't have any white privilege. I didn't have any privilege as I was growing up. My family worked hard for everything. Okay. And these are good, thoughtful Christian people who have thought this way because this is how societies have said you're supposed to think for their whole lives. And so to start to change that, and that's among Presbyterian Christian thinking people, not among folks who aren't being introspective. And so, as Joel said, we need to see this as a new movement, knowing that those who have been involved in civil rights and things get frustrated with that and say, we've been doing this for our whole lives. And so that's one of the pieces when we want to walk alongside people of color, people in poverty, and say, we're excited. What do we do now? If there isn't some frustration that says, where have you been?
Well, also our culture is very individualistic.
Oh, that's true.
Everything's about the individual's right, gun ownership, And I mean, it's written in our Constitution, all these individual rights and that I don't think, like I didn't grow up thinking about systems. You were middle class, you went to school, I'm not afraid to go to the grocery store and get shot because of my skin color. But it's happening. So I think it's a different mindset that we have to get into.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's just.
Continuing with the idea of racism, a lot of people thought, I really do want to treat everyone as one. And so, like just talking to people who are Black and brown openly in a new way and assuming that they're going to feel the same way, suddenly, right? That everyone suddenly is going to be as one, when in fact, that might be a surprise, and the Black and brown people might expect this systems issue is going to happen, is in play. Because that's really what we hear coming from Black and brown people a lot is, this is an issue for us.
Sure.
Susan. Well, I'm co-chair of Mission and Social Concerns along with Beth Askew as chair. And we have, within that commission, there's a whole bunch of ministries that do a lot of good things, primarily food related. And Beth and I have talked about that we don't spend time thinking about structural, what can we do? We seem to be more concerned with how are we going to manage the different ministries. And so we haven't really turned away from that because to look at what can we do to change things structurally.
And I think that's something that is pervasive among churches that want to do good ministry. For me, a rethinking of the Good Samaritan story was one that was really helpful to me in this regard. The Good Samaritan story, guy's beat up, Samaritan comes, and of course the true message is, who is the Samaritan to us? But for our purposes, he stops, fixes his bandages up, goes his way. Imagine the Samaritan comes that way the next week, and somebody else is beat up. And he uses his bandages and he takes him to the hotel, and the next week, and every time he comes that way, he's stopping and bandaging up someone to do. That's important work. It's an important ministry. That person needs the help. But imagine the Samaritan saying, maybe we need better lighting. Maybe we need patrols here to make sure that people are safe. Maybe
jobs that people don't go to steal. Good economic
Right,
system.
right, exactly. And that's the piece, it's just much harder because it's political in that it's the work of the people, which of course, everything we do is political, right? But changing the structure, the other that's a little more, more crass example, but it's one that really struck me. Someone shared this recently through the General Assembly, I can't remember who it was now. Better the image than the Good Samaritan. You're walking alongside a river and you see a baby floating down the river, and you jump in and you save the baby, and then there's more and more, and you call your friends and you say, let's set up the shop around the side here, and get more. We have a diaper drive for the babies, and we buy bassinets, and we're every baby that comes, we're taking care of and putting in here, and if someone walks in and says, is anybody gonna go upriver and find out who's throwing those babies in the river?
Sheila would be out there.
You know, that's what systemic work is. That's what structural work is. The day-to-day stuff is so important. We must feed people who are hungry, but working to dig into, but why are they hungry? Why can't they get a good job? Why can't they stay in houses? And to move away from the answer that many of us grew up with, they're lazy. Well, they deserve it. They made bad choices, and this is the consequence. And that society says that all the time. They're poor because they deserve it. And so working against that in our own mindset, the mindset of our congregation and our communities, is a big piece of what we have to do. Yes.
Well, something very positive, I think. I don't know if it's considered positive for a lot of Columbus people, but they've redone their zoning code in Columbus, and I live on off of Bethel Road. And Bethel Road and Henderson Road are going to be their zoning code has changed, and they're going to be held in high-rise, low-income housing all over the place to take out and replacing shopping centers that are going to be thumped. So that's going to be an interesting one, because I'm going to go to a Northwest Civic Association meeting, and I'm sure that's going to be a biggie. But that was the most positive change I could see, and I was a bit surprised to find out. It's so crazy. Henderson Road is one half up on the one side. To the south is Upper Arlington, but to the north is Columbus. So that's going to be interesting, because Upper Arlington has done something for their zoning code too. So we'll see what happens, but I'm sure it's not going to go past Henderson Road. Let me put it that way. For sure. Yeah.
So traffic, so
And transit.
I mean,
Well, it's never going to happen in Arlington.
hold on, let's try. Since we became Matthew 25, we said our focus is, church vitality. And isn't that something we should address before we move forward? Because we talked about how thin we're stretched. Check to look within ourselves, find out, can we do all of this on top of what we're doing? Or do we need to make changes ahead of time? And if so, when do we start doing that?
And I think that's the perfect question for you all to ask yourselves. And I think to have started with where you started, and to know that Covenant Presbyterian Church can't do all of this, right? You cannot do all of these things. In addition to the three building congregational vitality, dismantling structural racism, and eradicating systemic poverty, in 2022, although a lot of things didn't happen because of COVID in January 2022, they did add what they called intersectional priorities. Intersectional is another one of these words that 5 years ago you probably never heard before. But it literally means what it sounds like. It's where do things intersect. So where does racism and poverty, when they meet together, which they often do, what are some of the really key issues? One of them is climate change. Who does climate change most affect? The poor people and the Black and brown people, right? Across the globe. So climate change is one of those gender issues. Women, the challenges women face in society in terms of not being paid enough and discrimination. Even more so if you're poor and if you're brown, Black, right? That intersection. So issues of gender issues and a favorite new vocabulary word, I just look it up. Heteropatriarchy, which just, oh wow. Heteropatriarchy, which basically means, sorry guys, you're part of the problem. The white man.
They're recognizing LGBTQIA plus people. It's a way to name the problem that LGBTQIA plus people face. What do they face? They face heterosexual people whose privilege gets prioritized, and men who prioritize their power. It's the naming of the problem that those marginalized people face.
Heteropatriarchy is the name of God.
So that is an area, of course, you all who have, as County has worked on LGBTQIA plus stuff, that's an issue. And then the last is militarism. Again, poor people, people of color, that's for the military. So those are the intersectional priorities that have sort of come out of this. But again, as a congregation, you're not going to do all these things, right? What has been one of the things that has been most helpful in congregations is to look at what you do, that you already do, that you already have the energy for, and say, are there ways that we can do this that maybe in a small way address systems a little bit better, right? Not either throw it all out the window and start from scratch, or to say, fine, we'll add 10 new programs to already stretch people. But it's to say, for example, when we were in Mifflin, and we had Matthew 25 group, and we did a survey and said, are any of these areas important to you, the racism, the poverty? What would you like to learn more about? What would you like to be involved in? And then we kind of did a little deep dive into programs. Mifflin has so many programs that they already do. And one of the ones that we worked on, and I think you all do some of this as well, I guess it's Overbrook that does a lot, is now in every school system, Mifflin provides a hygiene closet. A more of a system approach for kids whose families can't make ends meet, that they can go and get products, feminine hygiene products, personal care products. Now, does that address the problem of why they can't get those? No. So there's yet another, but it was able to kind of think, because we were sort of doing things haphazardly, and so we kind of streamlined to say, this is how we're going to better address issues. So that would absolutely be one of the questions for Covenant, is to say, is there something that speaks to us with the gifts that you all have, the programs you're already working with? Are there ways to say, but let's think more system-wise? Let's think more. Are there structures that we could have some impact on? And again, there's tons of resources. There's tons of other speakers that could come in. And with that in mind, mindful of time being short, I want to mention one thing that I think is super important is that you really need to start with education, which you all do beautifully. I can't believe this many people are here on Memorial Day weekend. I applaud you. But it is because we have so much to unlearn, right? Things that we have always thought were true, just because society says it and we never really were reflective on it. Well, now we're reflective. And so we need to unlearn things as well as learn some of the language being used now. And so taking time to, well, let's deep dive into climate change, which I guess you're going to do in the fall. Let's deep dive into racism. Let's deep dive into, what is systemic poverty? What does that really mean? And do some education pieces on all of those, which again, your congregation is super good on that. And the other thing is to acknowledge as best you can with your limited resources. Not surprisingly, different people are in different places. I like an analogy of the interstate. You've got people who are waiting to decide if they're going to get on the interstate or not. And you've got those who are in the slow lane, who are in the merging, getting on thinking, I do want to know. I want to know more about systemic poverty. I made the decision, I'm going to merge. And then they go really slow because they're trying to learn, they want to know things. And you've got other folks in your congregation who are in that lane and you are going and you are ready to go and you want more resources. And so acknowledging that you're going to have people in your congregation who are in very different places, right? Some who are like I know it, you've sold me, I'm committed, what do we do? And other folks are like, wait, I don't know really what we're talking about here. Again, this sounds like it's way partisan, I don't know. So you need to do your best, and Doug asked this question at the very beginning to me. If you can move people from here to here, wherever their starting place is, right? If you can have people move one step more towards loving neighbor, right? If that's moving from not being willing to acknowledge white privilege to kind of say, okay, maybe I do see white privilege, to moving from it should be enough that we give out food every week to saying, oh, maybe we should think about why people have to come every week. If you can move people from one place to the next, that is a huge success. So again, congregationally, you need to figure out what are the little steps to take, and not be overwhelmed by, oh, how can we add one more thing? But to say, where are we? And this is what we do. And as you said, you and Beth, looking at the programs you do, is there a little step within those programs that can maybe address systems a little bit more than they already do?
So,
Yeah, one more question.
Yes, please.
Being a nonprofit, does this ever cause you to cross a line into politics that you are?
Super question, great question, and this has become my solid, heartfelt answer. These are issues that we are called to do by God, by Jesus, by this movement of the Spirit, to feed the hungry, to do justice, love kindness, to walk humbly with God, right? It's not my fault that one political party wants to do that more than another. Okay? I'm delighted. I'm leaving, so I can speak frankly. I'd be delighted to work with a Republican on affordable housing. I would be delighted. I would be thrilled to work with a Republican on living wage.
Amen.
I would be thrilled to talk about craft together a healthcare program with any political party. It's not my fault. I'm passionate about these issues, and I will work with whoever's going to work with them. And that's ending my time. If you're not familiar with the Poor People's Campaign, the Poor People's Campaign is a national movement. The Presbyterian Church supports the work of the Poor People's Campaign to empower poor and low-income workers to demand to lawmakers of affordable housing and childcare and healthcare, a living wage, environmental issues, a lot of these Matthew 25 kind of issues. And people say, oh, well, that sounds pretty Democrat to me. Well, no, these are moral issues facing our country. And I will work with anybody who also says these are moral issues facing our country. I am not willing to say, well, okay, I guess they're not moral issues. If you're Republican, they're not going to be moral issues. They are moral issues which transcends partisan politics. So that's my answer. So I am not choosing to be partisan. I will work with whoever, I will vote for whatever politician also sees these as moral imperatives.
But there is a certain line that nonprofit churches.
Well,
can't
and
go
of course,
across,
right.
That's
You have
what
to
I mean.
Joel can't stand up in the pulpit and say, you must vote for this person.
Okay,
We're
that's
going
what
to
I
hell.
that's the.
As some churches are doing, by the way.
Right.
Yeah.
And we
Right.
can't have signs out in front.
Right, exactly. And there are those lines of
Yeah, that's
things.
what I was.
Yeah. Well, now,
And
that
some
was your
people
question.
get awfully picky about.
Well, but you do. I mean, there are the legal things about nonprofit status. And I'm glad that was your question. I'm glad I misinterpreted so I could do my soapbox. So I feel a whole lot better. I feel a whole lot better about that.
But you don't have to be on a soapbox to say that for over 40 years, the US Congress still has the minimum wage is $7 and something.
For sure.
Which is, they can't live on it. I'd love to have them have to live on it for 6 months, and we'll see what kind of legislation they bring us.
Or their health insurance.
Well, I don't want to go late to
What's
church.
happening?
There are tons of resources. So again, as you want to look more into whether it's book studies or speakers, to have folks come and help you look at what are the programs you're already doing, and here's another way you can think about it, or another layer to add without overwhelming the great work that you're already doing here at Covenant. So there's lots of next steps, and keeping in mind, you've got some folks who are not quite ready for this yet, right? And so you want to make sure if you can move them one step, as you move one step, and allow opportunities for the folks who are right over here to move a step as well. So, yes.
What I really appreciate about what you're saying and reminding us is that the get in my mind from the Matthew 25 movement is the idea of movement. I mean, I think so many people, almost all of them perhaps, are concerned about perhaps the Presbyterian Church in general and our church in particular, that it's that it's a closed system, that we aren't finding people who want to also be members of Covenant to sustain it. And if it's a movement, then then suddenly we've got a reason for people to join us. Because as a club, I mean,
You're great people, but, there's other clubs, right?
I mean, and there's other churches, people who come to church, I think, want to do something.
For sure. Well, again, you all are real troopers for being here on Memorial Day weekend. I salute you for that.
Thank you.
Wow.